Howdy folks, I'm Malleable Manganese, meticulously marketing meddlesome mnemonics.
I'm Amber.
And here are some more meddlesome mnemonics that we can market. Amber, how can mnemonics be meddlesome?
Oh, they can be. Have you ever tried to learn some of those mnemonics?
That's not meddling, Amber. That's
They're
just being difficult.
they're meddlesome.
You're like right now, you're being difficult.
No,
Just in the same way that mnemonics might be difficult to learn.
nope.
I'm just kidding. Let's get started. Oh, and one note before we begin, we have a live stream coming up on Friday, so be sure to check out the end of the video for more details on that. Let's get started. Alright folks, our first letter is titled, Am I a jerk for telling my fiance that if he expects me to contribute 50-50, then we have to make some serious lifestyle changes? I am a 26-year-old female, and my fiance is a 26-year-old male. And he sat me down yesterday to give me a long talk about how he feels like I don't contribute enough to the household, particularly in the financial sense. I was a bit caught off guard by this, but I was willing to hear him out, since he wasn't wrong. He makes a lot more money than I do, and we've always split bills accordingly, which ends up being about 80% for him. I asked him what he wanted me to pay now, and he was adamant about it being 50-50. I asked if everything was alright with his job, or if he needed to take fewer hours, and he wouldn't answer me. I honestly wouldn't have gotten upset if there seemed to be an actual reason behind it, but he just said that he had been thinking about it a lot over and over, and every time I asked what brought him to this conclusion, what was going on, and eventually he said, "This is how it's going to be, take it or leave it." Those exact words in response to literally everything I said. Full shutdown, no explanation. I then told him that was fine, I'll take it. And then I asked if he had made a Zillow account yet, or if he expected me to. He looked confused and asked why we would need a Zillow account. I explained that there's no way that I can afford half of the rent on our current place, so we'll probably have to move into a one-bedroom apartment. He got mad and asked me why I didn't have savings. I told him that I do, but I'm not paying rent out of my savings, because that's a terrible idea and unsustainable. I also began to go over what our new food budget would have to be, our new entertainment budget, and that we would probably have to sell the cars and get one less expensive one because I can't afford half of the payments on the Audi and the Land Rover. Then I explained that date nights would probably have to be reduced too, and that we could still do like Buffalo Wild Wings or something, but I prefer Tuesday nights because you can get 2 orders of boneless wings for one. Basically, if he wants me to pay half, then we're living within my means, not his anymore. He kind of agreed to it, but since then, he's been incredibly angry. He's not saying or doing anything, but it's like he's walking around the house in this cloud of madness. I sent him 6 Zillow listings, all of which he called uninhabitable for various reasons. Some of which I think are valid, others I disagree with. He's now saying that I'm being unfair and manipulative, and that he tried to come to me with a serious concern about our relationship, and I'm making it impossible to talk to him, and I'm bulldozing over him. Am I the jerk? Alright folks, what do you think? Jerk or not the jerk?
Not the jerk. This is completely out of line the way he's acting. You're not being manipulative, you're being realistic. You don't have the money to accommodate his more lavish lifestyle.
Yeah.
And I do think you really need to get to the bottom of this whole thing, though, before you make any more plans with this man, because either one, he's been like watching videos or someone has been in his ear that a relationship isn't good unless everything's financially 50-50, or two, it sounds like there could be something wrong with his work that he's not telling you about, because you mentioned that he wouldn't answer any questions about that, and if he's lost his income and just doesn't want to tell you, like, that's also not a good thing.
I think that there's some concerning bits in here. I don't know if he's lost his job. I think that to me more said like he was just shutting down the conversation and didn't want to give her the real reason why he doesn't want to split the finances the way they currently have it. But it could be a financial thing. I mean, it's really difficult to say without knowing his perspective. I understand his desire to have things split 50-50, but I think that OP's making very good points here that if that's the case, then it needs to be 50-50 within her means. She can't go and spend all of her money every single month, and she can't dig into her savings account just because he wants her to pay 50-50. It really needs to be equitable for her.
Yeah, and I would say definitely do not dip into your savings no matter what, because this could be one of those situations where he drains you financially and then you're completely dependent on him.
Yeah.
Like, this is really concerning red flag behavior, and like, I just do not have warm fuzzies about this situation at all.
Yeah, but I think OP is actually handling this in the most adult and responsible way that you can. While it's a difficult situation, she says that she's willing to work with him, and she's like, well, I mean, I guess we'll work together and solve this problem if you really feel like this is a problem. And then he's kind of flipping the script on her and being
Mm-hmm.
like, you're being the unreasonable one.
Well, then that's the other concerning thing. It seems like she is trying to be very accommodating, and he's doing kind of the Darbo thing, where
Yeah.
like, oh, it's you. You're being difficult because you're not acquiescing to my demands and spending every last savings to give me the lifestyle I want.
Yeah. Well, and what OP did was come up with a compromise.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the only compromise in the situation that will work because OP can't afford their current lifestyle,
Right.
not on her current salary. She's earning 20% of what he's earning. So he needs to accept that. He needs to start if OP is going to continue to pay the same rate, which I think is reasonable,
Mm-hmm.
then they're going to have to reduce their lifestyle by, 60%.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's the thing. Is like my personal opinion is when it comes to relationships, people should contribute in accordance to their means. It shouldn't be like a tit for tat, I pay exactly half of everything because not everyone's in the same position financially. And so I don't understand his reasoning here. I don't think there's a valid reason for this reasoning. And but again, if this is so important to him, he needs to be willing to live within OP's means and not his.
Yeah. And I just think it's a terribly unfair situation for poor OP here
Mm-hmm.
because they're in a no-win situation with this guy at this point in time. No matter what they do, it's always the wrong answer. And
Mm-hmm.
that to me just says that he's looking for an excuse to break things off or I don't know.
Or, I mean, kind of my guess is like he may have a friend like who's been like, oh, if she's not going 50-50, or maybe he's been, reading those misogynistic stuff online or something, and I don't know, but
Yeah, but like I said, I think that OP came up with a really great compromise here and it seems like he's just shutting things down because he doesn't want to compromise.
mm-hmm.
And either he's going to have to come to terms with this and compromise, or he's going to have to foot the bill for a more lavish lifestyle. And I mean, OP's already said, I'm willing to come to that level. But let me know what you folks think. So anyhow, take care and good luck. And Nanny Og says, is this an ad for Zillow? And OP replies, Buffalo Wild Wings, actually. And Big Money says, replying here so you have a better chance at seeing it. Did your partner go to college? Because there's a chance that his student loans are being set back to an active state on September 1st, and this is the reason for him bringing this up. If he wasn't paying them down over the last 3 years, there's a chance that your guy's potential lifestyle creep over the pandemic has stretched his finances too far thin. This would explain a bit, to be honest. That's a good point.
Yeah.
And OP replies, he did actually. A lot of people will happen with their finances is the moment they start making more money, they start spending more money. And
Mm-hmm.
so they never get to the point where they're actually able to pay down loans. They're not able to actually live within their means because they keep increasing their means.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the best ways of paying off loans and paying off what you owe and everything is by examining your finances very carefully and putting together a budget and making sure that you're constantly living within your means.
Yeah, well, and I mean, this seems like a very plausible scenario, and if this is the case, then like that is something to be concerned about, OP, because if he's being dishonest about this, one, if you were to marry him, you would inherit his debt as well to some degree. Like if he were to die, you might be stuck with those loans potentially as his spouse. And then also it just doesn't. It's not a very good thing if he's not willing to be open and honest about the whole financial picture.
Yeah, this I think they need to have a serious conversation about finances and figure out where each other are financially,
Mm-hmm.
because it doesn't sound like they have any idea about what's in the other's bank account,
Mm-hmm.
which isn't necessarily a great place. I mean, I'm not saying that you need to share every single detail of your finances with your partner, but it's a good idea that you both, if you're getting married especially, that you both have a good idea about where you stand financially.
Well, that's the thing is if you're going to go into a commitment where you both are on the hook for certain debts, like your partner needs to be aware of that before they marry you.
Yeah, exactly. And Untranslatable says, well played. Another option would be to seriously scrimp and offer to take an additional education so that you can raise your earnings potential. For example, honey, in order to afford the lifestyle that you want at 50-50, I've decided to start applying to law school. And OP replies, I've always planned to go to college, but honestly, there's no way that I could afford that, especially if we end up doing 50-50. And Technocore says, leave it. He gave you a reason and an out. Take it. And OP replies, I love and plan on marrying this person. I'm not leaving because of something that hasn't even been resolved yet. Alright, folks, and our next letter is titled, Am I a Jerk for Getting a Vasectomy Without Telling My Wife? Edited to include the paragraph structure that didn't copy and paste well from the notes. My wife is a 29-year-old female, and I'm a 35-year-old male, and we've been married for 3 years, but we started dating 9 years ago after a mutual friend introduced us at a party. We immediately hit it off, and there was an instant spark, so things began to get serious. We inevitably had a discussion about what we wanted in life, marriage, kids, etc. We agreed on almost everything except for having kids. She explained that she always wanted to be a mom, so she was quite upset to learn that I don't want kids. A point I wasn't prepared to move on. Understandably, she decided that she needed some space to think about us and our future, but she told me that it was a potential deal breaker. After our conversation, we had a minimal contact for about a month, during which time she went out of state and spent some time with her mom and sister, hoping their input might be able to help. When she returned, I was suspecting a breakup, but that never came. To my surprise, she said that her mom and sister had helped her understand that she doesn't need kids to be happy, that she and I were wonderful together, and that she loves me, so that's all that matters. She even had made the decision to have an IUD put in, and had considerable thought put into choosing that form of contraception because of how effective it is, and also because it would mean that we wouldn't have to rely on condoms or the pill. Fast forward quite a bit, I ended up proposing, and she said yes, and we have an amazing time planning the wedding and honeymoon. Throughout the years, I had occasionally asked if she was absolutely sure with her decision to choose me over kids. Invariably, she always said yes, that I mattered more. However, as the big day drew closer and closer, it was playing on my mind a lot, and I was feeling guilty that a decision that I made for myself could impact her future happiness. I once again asked if she was sure. She assured me that I had nothing to worry about, that she had reconciled with that decision many years ago, and that our happiness is all that matters. I finally drew a line under it, as she had told me to, and accepted that I don't need to keep asking her. The wedding came and went, we had an amazing day, and it's been 3 years of marriage. I wish I could say it's been 3 wonderful years, but unfortunately it has not. About a year ago, things took quite a drastic turn. At first, she began to subtly mention kids, her friends getting pregnant, and how it's such a wonderful and joyous thing, and would jokingly mention that our kids would look so cute. This led to an intense conversation about her wanting kids and how she was now having trouble with the decision to not have them. That train of thought quickly led to anger, which was directed entirely at me because she blamed me for ruining her life. Recently, there has been a number of explosive, albeit one-sided arguments where she started yelling at me for being a jerk in front of her friends and family. This has happened at her home, and most recently at a restaurant with her mom, dad, and brother. I suspect that she's done this to try and get sympathy and embarrass me, but it's not gone well for her. Thankfully, every time that she has exploded at me, it's been in front of close friends and family that knew the entire story and who have been quick to point out that she always knew that I didn't want kids, but she made a decision to stick with me anyways. At the restaurant last month, her brother and mom took my side and told her that she was acting unreasonable and unfair and that she can't blame me for a decision that she made. She told her brother that he was only defending me because he's an F-boy, and she accused her brother and mom of bullying her, and she stormed out of the restaurant. I'm pretty sure that we would have been kicked out if she hadn't let herself out. After a week of silence, she apologized to me, and since then, she's been lovely. Completely back to the woman that I fell in love with and married. There have been no tantrums or name calling, no yelling about the fact that I ruined her life, nothing. She just is very loving and affectionate. We went back to holding hands, kissing, and going out for dinners, cuddling, and because she seemed to have gotten over her anger for me, she also wanted me to start having adult intimate time with her. I was surprised by the quick 180 shift, but didn't think much of it. I figured that she may have started to briefly second guess her decision when she saw her friends were starting to get pregnant, but she has gotten over it somehow. I thought that we were getting back to being us until I got a call from her sister 2 weeks ago. Her sister told me that after the explosion at the restaurant, my wife realized that the yelling wasn't going to solve anything, so she was planning on having her IUD removed. Her new plan was to get pregnant accidentally because she's convinced that once I hold my miracle child in my arms, I'll fall in love with the idea of kids and having more kids. Her sister was shocked to hear her plan, and having spoken about it with her mom and her other sister, decided it was best to tell me what my wife was planning. Needless to say, I felt sick when I heard this, especially when I realized that it would have explained the sudden shift in her behavior towards me and why she suddenly wanted to start having adult intimate time with me again. Once I calmed down, I immediately booked myself in to have a vasectomy, which I had last Thursday. I've booked into a hotel for the week to ride out the recovery, and I've explained my absence as a work-related trip. She's been sending me flirty and suggestive texts and says that she can't wait until I get home. From what her sister tells me, my wife has now had her IUD removed. Am I the jerk for doing this without speaking to her, or is she the jerk for changing the entire dynamic of our relationship and going through with a marriage when she knew that I didn't want to have kids? All right, folks, what do you think?
I think you're asking the wrong questions to some degree, OP. I think you just need to divorce her at this point. Like, if she's willing to go to reproductive coercion to get her kids, like, that's not a healthy marriage.
Yeah.
And you should be communicating with your partner about reproductive decisions.
Yeah.
And so you just need to divorce her at this point in time. You're not compatible. You have different life goals, and she's not going to be happy in a marriage with you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
at this point in time, if you were to stick with her, have the vasectomy, and not tell her, like, that's a really cruel thing to do. Like, she's being absolutely horrible by trying to coerce you into having kids, no doubt. But it's also not okay to have a vasectomy, not tell your partner who you know desperately wants kids, and then have them potentially feeling like they're a failure for not having the kids they want.
Well, and then on top of that, I mean, there's this other side where she's had her ID removed without telling him.
Yeah.
And so that's just going to add a lot of frustration into the situation where she is really looking forward to having kids and OP is not. And so there's a really still a strong conflict of wills here.
And if you're going to that step, like, is there any trust left in this marriage? Like, she has done something unforgivable. You've done something that's not going to be trustworthy to her. Like, neither of you has any faith or trust in each other.
I think that OP, you probably should have gotten a vasectomy years ago.
Yeah, well,
it's really what it boils down to. Before any of this started blowing over, you could have just said, I'm going to go get a vasectomy. That way you don't even have to worry about having an IUD.
And to be fair, like, I understand medical procedures aren't fun and they're scary, and there's a lot of valid reasons for not wanting to get one done.
My only point here, and I think we're kind of getting into the weeds, is that OP is wrong for going behind his wife's back and getting a vasectomy, but justified in his wrongness.
Yeah.
She's wrong for going behind his back and getting her IUD removed without telling him. And she needs to realize that the relationship, if her goals don't match his, then they're not a team at that point in time, and they need to either realign their goals or they need to move in separate directions. So I don't think that there is salvaging this relationship. I think that OP, the moment you tell her that you've had a vasectomy, that she's going to go right back to the way she was before and be angry and upset. And I think that you did this out of self-defense. You were like, I don't want reproductive coercion happening to me. And I think that was a perfectly legitimate decision. It's your own sexual health. But I also think that the sneaking around behind each other's backs really just shows that there is, like Amber said, a lack of trust.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it was perfectly fine and valid to get it done because you do not want to have kids and you don't want to have that possibility. But I do think you need to be open and honest at this point in time, and it's probably going to be the end of the marriage.
Yeah. But let me know what you folks think. So anyhow, take care and good luck. And Life Coach 421 says, equal amounts. She told you that you meant more than having children, which I'm sure was true at a time. As a woman gets older, sometimes their balance shifts. Sadly, I don't believe you ever told her that you love her more than you didn't want to have children. You even stated that you expected her to break up with you. Did you even tell her that you would rather break up than have children? That's where I think that you might have been the jerk. You're hoping that she's changed her mind, and now you're having to blame it all on her because she said that she did time for you to come clean, and tell her that you don't love her enough to want to make it work if she really wants children. And OP replies, I did tell her that I think we should break up, several times in fact. It came up every few years when I'd really feel guilty about her giving up on kids. We had a serious discussion before the wedding. Each time it came close to me leaving, she accused me of not respecting the decision that she's made for herself and being a typical guy for feeling like I know what's best for her without taking her thoughts and feelings into consideration. So what was I meant to do? Honest question.
I mean, I think Opie is a very valid point there, and I think the other person was unfortunately being a little flippant. Like, you can love someone very much and not want certain life circumstances.
And Casey Perina says that you can get a vasectomy without notifying your wife, but that she couldn't get her tubes tied without notifying you or your consent in this country, or even as a single woman if she didn't want kids, is the biggest jerk move in this country. That being said, you're both the jerks and additionally are wholly incompatible. Wind this up and go your separate ways. This marriage is unfair to you both. And OP replies, I agree, it's an awful double standard, but for the sake of transparency, I didn't have to have the procedure done in the US. I came to London to have it done in a private clinic here because unlike many clinics back home, they couldn't fit me in straight away. I didn't need to go for a pre-vasectomy counseling. And although they encouraged it, I didn't have to inform my wife about the procedure for the clinic. I mean, I do want to talk about that double standard there for a second. And that isn't something that OP has any control over, but I do think that that's a terrible double standard. And it's awful that there are places where that's the case.
Yeah, well, it really is. And again, like in general, it's much harder for people to get tubal ligations because there's this assumption that, you know, we're kind of meant to have kids. Like, oh, you're a baby machine. And there's all kinds of awful double standards, and it's not okay.
And Rosen Pedalin says, not the jerk, props to your sister-in-law for telling you this. You should probably end this relationship, though. And OP replies, interestingly, a few people have said that my sister-in-law is the jerk here.
Honestly, I think the sister-in-law, props to her, I agree, because no one should have a child that they don't want.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of, in a very tangentially way, similar to that conversation that we had just the other day about the guy who had a vasectomy and didn't tell his fiance, where she was looking forward to having kids and he didn't want to have kids, and it was accidentally spilled. And I mean, it really was an accident at that point in time. But I think that in this particular case, like, people do have a right to medical freedom and privacy. But when you're talking about reproductive coercion, I think that changes the dynamic slightly. Like, if someone was meddling with your protection, right? At that point in time, you are allowed to tell somebody, hey, I think that your partner might be messing with their protection or not taking their birth control or something like that, just giving you a heads up. And it's a sticky situation because privacy is important too.
Well, it is, but also she told a family member, like, this isn't a clinic violating HIPAA laws.
No.
You know, a family member. And I think, again, because of the severity of the consequences, like, yes, people do need medical privacy a lot of times. But because of the implications for OP, I think it was better off that he know than not know.
Well, and it also would impact the child's life, right? Like, this isn't just impacting OP's life and the fiance or the wife's, right? This is impacting a real person who might exist someday.
Right.
And how are they going to be if they have a father who wants nothing to do with them.
Right. He could be completely resentful of the child, or he might walk out. There's all kinds of things that could happen that would not be good scenarios necessarily for a child.
And Rose in Penland says, in my opinion, I don't think so. Then again, I don't want kids either. So anyone saving me from having kids is my hero.
Yeah.
And OP replies, I don't think so either. It took a lot of courage and conviction to tell me. Alright folks, it is tea time. Grab your beverages of choice. I've got a beverage of choice here, and Amber's got a dwindling joke book, it looks like.
Oh, I'm just at the back of it. I was working the other direction. Nurse says, Doctor, there's an invisible monster in the waiting room. Doctor, tell him I can't see him.
That would make sense. It would make a lot of sense on why the doctor couldn't see the invisible monster, except for the fact that we have infrared and ultraviolet sensors, and so of course you can see the monster, Doctor.
Well, that's assuming the monster gives off infrared or ultraviolet radiation.
Well, I am going to assume that they must.
Maybe they're just like purely like no light whatsoever, just like this pure. Well, I guess then you'd see them because it would be like pure blackness.
Yeah, they have to interact weekly with matter, right? Because if they're interacting weekly with matter, at the very minimum, they can be inside of our world and interact with things. Like they're walking around. They're going to a doctor, which I'm assuming means that the monster interacts with people. Which I'm assuming then also means the monster is sick. And how did the monster tell that it was sick if it's invisible? It used a thermometer, alright? And if the monster has a temperature, then that means that you can see it in the infrared spectrum, Amber. And that's my logic and reasoning
But how
here.
do you know the monster has a fever? There's all kinds of other symptoms that don't require having a temperature.
Fair point, like being invisible. And I have licorice spice. Alright folks, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for watching. Happy Tuesday, spelled T-W-O. As you can see, we have the live stream information up on the screen. So if you want to be here on the 25th, then we're looking forward to seeing you. Amber, we need some kind of moral advice and or guidance. And please, have it in the form of some sound financial advice.
In a relationship, it's a good idea to have both partners contribute in accordance with their means so they can both have savings and both have assets if the relationship dissolves. Yeah, that's my financial advice for today.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Take care, and we'll see you all tomorrow.
Bye.